fiddlesticks. I think I stopped recording there. Anyway, if I can't clip things together, but maybe my assistant can. Anyway, enough blather. And the sun's gone out. So I promised a part 2 to the first job in London I had, but probably only in response to trolling. Like, there's a Laurie Brown, which Anonymous tells me, and YouTube something or other tells me is the mouse. But I've stopped observing fake accounts. I did work very hard with the likes of researcher who calls himself Jesus, and Eddie is okay, and other great researchers. We did do a very in-depth dive on trolls connected to Hoaxstead research, and then people like Nicky Cooper came up with the Trolling Academy in Swansea, and people like Brian Hurl went after Flow Destroyer in Scotland, and we did a pretty good job at exposing that whole trolling, professional trolling thing. And now I just bless them, like I don't know who's an enemy, who's not, it's too draining. It's distraction, which is intended to be. So the Boholoin, is something my father used to make us collect out of the 65-acre small holding he bought in Ireland, because they're very poisonous. But curiously, he would also lay them out to dry in the sun and then do whatever he did with them after that. Pastes in little brown jars would appear in the garage. And as I say, he used to boast that he could count on one hand the number of books he'd read in his life. He left school at 13, having been brutalised by the Christian Brothers in Dungarvan. But he would boast that he could count on one hand the number of books he'd read, and one of them was about Farmland Poisons, and I gave it to the police. I don't think I ever got it back, in a failed investigation into the likely poisoning of my sister, who died and is buried here. But that's not what I came on here to talk about. Like I said, I'm waiting for one more tiny cable to get my new microphone up and running. And it feels like God's put me on sabbatical from proper YouTube, like where you sit and share screens, show documents, and go deep, So yeah, just to fill in, like, I left school at 18 with 3 A-levels from Bradford-on-Avon in Wiltshire, Fitzmaurice Grammar, with A-levels in English, French and German. And having turned down an offer to do journalism originally at 16 in Cardiff, I chose a different route. So I left school at 18 and I got a job, and I got engaged to somebody who turned out to be a millionaire, likely Freemason, and vintage Formula 1 driver, number 3 ranked in the world the last time I checked. So I don't know if we did get engaged. He asked me to marry him. I'm not sure if I said yes. I can't remember. But my mother thought he was too provincial. And also, she was jealous of her daughters, 5 daughters, with an abusive father. And the only way she knew was to get us gone. So I got grace to even stay till 18 because I was very bright. So I did my A-levels. But then the minute I did my A-levels, she wanted me gone. And I'd got a local job in Unigate in Melksham in quality control. And by their standards, it was good pay. And I was happy out, dating my boyfriend and having my good job in Melksham, and, passed my driving test and looking forward to a sort of maybe, possibly normal life. And then my mother announces to me, "Oh, I've got you a job interview in London." My mother grew up in Hornchurch and worked in the city of London. And I'm like, pardon, what? And she says, "Oh yes, multilingual salesperson required with good interactive people skills for whatever words they used for." Anyway, So I was driving a Vauxhall Victor Super Saloon at the time. I was only a new driver. It had beautiful leather bench seats, both front and back, because it was the gear stick that kind of comes out of the dashboard. It's like column gear, that's what they called it, column gear. So she says, yeah, you've got an interview, blah, blah. She'd found it in the Telegraph or something. So I thought, all right then. My boyfriend, almost fiance, was furious, just like, what? And so off I drove up the M4 to London. And I remember saying to my mum later, I came across a really busy roundabout, Mum. It was quite scary. It was Hyde Park Corner. And then you drive up Green Park, and I don't know how or where I parked. And I went and got the interview. It was beautiful, Ruby. I went and got the interview. And it turned out to be like almost Savile Row Tailors. And, a likely fake account accused me of being anti-Semitic for saying that it was a Jewish tailors, which it was. And so they took me on. They cut the advertised salary by a third, and then they broke the commission promise. As I stated, I'll post the link in this description to the last video. And like, even though it was almost Savile Row and it was, amazing clothing like cashmere silk and, Gucci or whatever, it definitely was almost Savile Row. It was just round the corner from Savile Row, but it was still a high-end location. Shaftesbury Avenue was round the corner. Regent Street was the next parallel street. It was on, I've got a feeling it started as Green Park, but it changed into another name. It was the same road the Savoy Hotel was on. I remember having tea at the Savoy. I'm 65 in 2 weeks, so, But anyway, so this troll accused me of being possibly anti-Semitic for reporting that it was a Jewish tailors, and reporting that they didn't honour the contract. But it didn't matter. What I did learn in the 6 weeks I was there, at the tender age of 18, being taken away from Bradford-on-Avon in Wiltshire and, possibly semi-normal future, I learned never to take hard drugs. It was the most shocking experience of my 18-year-old life. I'm trying to get rid of this. Yeah, go away, chathead. Right. No, I can't do it. You're probably anyway, you can't probably see it. Yeah, so in my lunch breaks, so another school friend gave me a room to rent in West Croydon at the time. And I would commute on the train to Victoria and then the bus up Green Park or whatever it was called. And what I learned was never, ever, 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 ever take heroin or hard drugs. Because in my lunch breaks, which I was like Crocodile Dundee on another planet, I would just wander around. And beside the tailor shop was an alleyway with a red phone box. And in those days, this was like 1976. There were no mobile phones. So sometimes I'd go to the phone box. And I remember once going and finding I don't like to use the word junkie, a heroin addict, collapsed, probably with an OD, in the phone box, and just going back to the shop and saying, can somebody call 999? And they acted like it was normal. And another time, I would wander, you could wander across Piccadilly Circus and then you'd come to like Leicester Square, and if you wandered a bit further you'd come to Soho. So I would just see how much I could pack into an hour-long lunch break to break the boredom of working it was like, are you being served or something? And then I would see another addict sitting in their own vomit, just sitting in the street in their own vomit. And the more exciting story, and this might have contributed equally to my leaving, it was around the time David Bowie's movie The Man Who Fell to Earth was premiering in Leicester Square. And so I found myself in Leicester Square. There's a kind of green in front of it. And to my utter amazement, because I'd even spoken to him before at a gig, and he let me sit on stage and watch it. I said I was a university journalist, which I was at the time. Maybe that was later. Yeah, that must have been later. But to my amazement, I found David Bowie sitting on the green outside Leicester Square, where the movie was due to premiere that night. And I'm so dutiful. My lunch break was nearly over. It was like 10 to 2 or 5 to 2 or something. So instead of just taking the opportunity to sit down and interview him, I nearly ran back to the tailors and said, can I please extend my lunch hour? David Bowie's on the green in front of Leicester Square, and I really, really want to interview him. And they said, if you do, you'll be fired. So I think that was just as good a reason to quit as the fact that they reduced my wages by a third that was advertised and wouldn't pay me my commission. I went on to have another opportunity, well, several, after I'd done, or I think it was while I was at the University of Warwick doing an English degree, which I did as a mature student at 21 to 24. I went to a gig, and I was a journalist at uni, you know, like on the university mag and all that kind of thing. So I said to David Bowie's people at a gig, I'm at University of Warwick, I'm a journalist, and I'd like to interview him. And he said to me himself, he said, I can't do pre-show interviews. I get so nervous, I vomit. But he says, you're more than welcome to sit on stage and report on the gig, more than welcome. So that's what I did. But then years later, when I almost got sucked into taking my boys, re-emigrating to America and taking my 2 Power Disney boys to Los Angeles, he stayed in very close contact on MySpace, as did Sony Suzuki, as did Kiefer Sutherland, as did Donald Sutherland, as did Jeffrey Mitchell, many other Hollywood people. And I'm so grateful that I'm so grateful that I didn't choose to move my boys back to Hollywood. Like, I'd raised them in Ireland. They were in a school of 200 students. The school they would have gone to in Santa Monica was 2,500 students with its own police force. And I think that was a narrow escape. So I think that may be as many stories about the tailor's shop, which happened to be Jewish, as most were in London in the 70s. And to the trolls, God bless you. Here we are, it's a lovely day. Ruby's having a lovely time. God bless people.